right, welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast today. We have Travis McMaster. Welcome, Travis.
Good to be here, James. Thanks for having me, brother.
All right, thanks for coming on from the storage room there and bringing
This
that with
actually
you.
is
But
our F&C storage. We got Flywheels, Extra Fly, Smart Speed,
oh, nice.
GPS.
Yeah, we've actually touched on XFI on the podcast before. If anyone's interested, go back and listen to John Cronin as well back
Yeah.
there. But I mean, we've had pretty much the whole AU2 Dam staff and students on this podcast so far, and it's been awesome having everyone on and catching up. I don't know if you remember, you're actually probably one of my first lecturers at uni back in like year one with exercise prescription. I don't know if you remember me and Kaz in class way back. That was like first year uni. That must have been 2009.
2009 or 10. Yeah, I remember those days, brother.
Yeah.
I remember
That
the
was
two meatheads in the front.
yeah, exactly. We just like all we did was just train. But obviously, you've been coaching for a long time. You got your PhD. So you want to maybe just give us a brief background about, I guess, your background, what you've been up to, obviously with the studies and with the professional coaching.
Yeah, so I've been involved in sports science S&C since 2006, 2005. So it's been a bit of a journey, involved with multiple sports over the years. Went to ECU, did my sports science to masters at ECU, which has kind of laid my foundation for like the obsession with sports science and biomechanics and human movement. So they're a really good program over there in Australia.
Mm.
And that kind of led to moving over to New Zealand to do my PhD with rugby. Lots of testing with the All Blacks and Black Ferns. So it was quite a good initiation into elite sport. You had a lot of access to working with elite athletes while you studied. So one thing the Southern Hemisphere does really well is that integration piece, placement co-op piece, where they have you place with elite teams so you can learn in the environment, not just in the books. So they really get applied, right? You know firsthand that New Zealand and Australia are really good applied sports science S&C platforms, how they build it into the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, real good that way. From there, a bit of a journey back and forth between North America and New Zealand. Obviously, I'm married to a Kiwi. My wife's a Kiwi. My kids are Kiwis, so they're New Zealanders. But we love both parts of the world, so we'll continue to be nomads. Just we'll find out where this journey takes us. But yeah, I worked in Whistler with the Canadian freestyle ski team, leading the Sochi Olympics, and then back to NZ, did a bit of consulting with Super Rugby and universities, and then kind of lucked out with a job with the ABs and Blackfern Sevens, so All Black Sevens and Blackfern Sevens as their support S&C sports science combination. So that's kind of what led me into becoming the head S&C with this program as well. I had a short stint over in Las Vegas with the current Stanley Cup champions. So one year too late. I should have stayed on an extra year. The boys actually brought the cup home, which was quite good to see this year. I was their sports scientist for the year 2020, 2021 with the Golden Knights in Vegas. Just tough pulling a coastal girl and her family away from the ocean, moving to the desert. So bit of a balance there in terms of work, life, and how you make that work. And we know everyone that works in elite sport is an S&C or sports scientist. There's actually no such thing in balance.
Oh, man.
It's just ebbs and flow. So making the most of your time when you're off and making the most of the time when you're at work. So anyone listening that wants to get into S&C, just understand how this job works and how you and your family operate and how the dynamics work in terms of before you actually jump in both feet, brother. That'd be my word of advice for young S&C.
I think we've all been through the ringer with that. Obviously, moving with my wife to Romania, taking her out of the States when she just moved here, to Romania. There's obviously a challenge in itself, but we found our way back here, so it's all good in the end. But I think it's interesting because obviously both sports, you got ice hockey at the professional level, you've got rugby sevens. I usually say on this podcast, rugby and sevens is probably the closest thing in terms of physical preparation to combat sports.
Yeah.
And a lot of similarities and a lot of repeat sprint, repeat power ability stuff. And even with ice hockey, I mean, you guys are on the ice for what, 1-2 minutes, sprint plays and then back off?
Not even, bro. 30 seconds to a minute. So it's extremely high anaerobic load.
Yeah.
Lactate threshold. Like the legs are blowing out each shift, and it's how you train them to do that over and over again, right? So give them the capacity to repeat that work is that anyone can do it one off, right? A one-off sprint, it's being able to do it over and over again, over 82 games, so.
Yeah, let's start there. let's start
Yeah,
there.
bro.
How we okay? It's a general loaded question because it can go anywhere. But how are you developing that ability to repeat those 30 to 60 second bursts? Because obviously that's still applicable within combat sports. You need to be able to do that within whether you're striking, MMA, or grappling. So
Yeah.
yeah, how are
So
you going about that?
before we even look at repeating that, it's do they have where is their initial capacity at from a pure output point of view, right? From that top of the curve, that phosphate creatine, where's their max output?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's nowhere where we need it to be, then we have to look at why. Is it strength? Is it force? Is it what is their weakness in that area to bring that power capacity up? And then from there, once we have a level of capacity, how do we repeat that over and over again to maintain
Yeah.
within say 10% of that? So initially, we need to build a foundation base for everything. This I think this goes for every attribute you're looking to build, right? So you need that strong strength, aerobic foundation to build from. So from both ends of the spectrum, thinking strength, thinking aerobic, you need those base to be able to tolerate the load that you're going to give the athlete. So
Mm-hmm.
first thing is get that foundation. And once you have that foundation, then you can start to build that individual capacity in terms of anaerobic work, repeat speed. And obviously we periodize it throughout the season. To give you an example, in rugby, we start being work from general. So we work from
Mm-hmm.
doing it running and on a watt bike where it's very controlled on how we shift
Yeah.
the curve, shift the anaerobic output. So example be 15-second effort, 45-second rest. Repeat that 8 times. See the drop off.
Yep.
See the mean power drop off. And then you can start to train it from there on terms of their output.
Okay.
And then we transfer it to the field. So how we build it into rugby. So we start with obviously down ups and changing directions. Where they're working for those same work to rest ratios, so it's either a 1-to-3 or 1-to-6, depending on what we're looking to build there in terms of capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move it and apply it into rugby, where they do it in contact, do it in the small-sided game, and then we build it we call it from control to chaos. If you've read anything about Matt Taverner in terms of it's more of a return to play thing, but you can use the same concept from a physical attribute and how you apply it to a game or the sport you're with, right? So how you will build a combat athlete to handle 5 3-minute rounds.
Mm-hmm.
How you would build that capacity in a general and then into the fighting context as well. So
Okay. Do you want to dive a little bit into that foundational side? Obviously, you mentioned, okay, you've got the strength side, the aerobic side you're trying to build first. That 8 by 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off, is that kind of like the general test you're using then to see the drop
45
off?
second up. That'd be an anaerobic stimulus. So we'll do repeated power test where we do 7-second sprints and go every 30 seconds for 10.
Okay. That's your
and
test.
you look
Gotcha.
at the drop off. So that's on a watt bike generally. It's easiest to control. It's easy to focus on the lower body there. You could do it on other equipment as well if you found the right piece, right? You could do it on a salt bike if you want. It just depends on the consistency of your methods and profiling, right?
Yeah. Okay, that
and
makes
then
sense.
we'll have an on-field test, which is the same thing. The repeat efforts with contact, be like shuttles with contact, and we still look at the drop off in terms of their output.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the same work to rest, but it's applied to the field, not just on a bike.
Yeah.
So it's a bit less stable and standardized than the bike, but it's the next closest thing to the
next
game.
step.
Yeah, the next step in our mind.
Nice.
And then you look at
you go ahead. You go.
No, then you look at their profile from there. So what's their peak? What's their drop off or decay over that time? And try to shift both. So if their peak output's too low, you need to shift that up individually. Yeah. And if the decay is too large, you have to work on that repeat effort on bringing that up. So there's a less of a drop off in terms of their output over time.
We'll dive into that in just a sec. Obviously, someone's just commented, G, saying thanks for the podcast and informational videos. Keep up the good work. This information is gold as someone who is training in MMA. Thank you very much, G. And for anyone listening to this recorded, make sure you jump on these live. They're scheduled on YouTube. But Travis, you mentioned obviously someone might have a low output or someone might have a hard drop off and you're trying to kind of balance that, bring both those sides up. How are you targeting the output side to improve that? And then how are you targeting the capacity side to reduce the drop off?
Yeah, so we'll target the output side in not a separate session, but we always do the output side first. So when you're freshest, you need to train the output. And you got to get those work to rest ratios out correct so that output is always high. You don't want them to be done under fatigue if you're working on shifting an output.
Yeah.
So it's when you're doing this goes for any power rep. If you're doing jumps, you make sure you have adequate rest in between your sets so that output remains high. And you monitor that output on a watt bike or with your velocity, with your gym aware or tendo units, depending on what equipment you have and what movement you're doing. But typically we go no more than or no less than 2 to 3 minutes rest, depending on the output. The output might only be for 3 to 7 seconds, but that rest has to be
Yeah.
a large chunk of that. So like a 1 to 10 even work to rest, a 1 to 12 even. So they're fully recovered. And you can shift that by auto regulation. You look, if the output's not recovering, you have longer rest the next set. I don't know if our listeners understand what I mean by that, but if auto regulation is if you're looking at a power output, say they can produce 1,000 watts, next set they only produce 850, you might have a higher rest period before that third set, so they can get back to that within that 5% range of their max, if you will. When you're trying to train, this is when you're trying to train pure output. You want the muscle not to be under fatigue.
Yeah. And a lot of those cardio machines display watts or power, like rowing machines. A lot of spin bikes also display that too. So you can kind of measure that. And then you want to try and stay within 5% of that for your 3 to 7 second sprints.
Correct. You want to stay within that upper range. Otherwise, you're defeating the purpose. You're starting to train different system here. You're starting to train that repeated sprint ability when you actually really want to just focus on producing a maximum output.
Nice. And then with the capacity, then how are you developing that? Is there much emphasis on developing that or spending time in that low intensity, quote unquote, aerobic zone or zone 2 that a lot of people are talking about or made popular now?
We do a lot of that. We do a lot of zone 2 at the end of a day. It's going to be anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the week, in zone 2, on a bike, on a rower. It's off feet, so we have enough running load as it is our athletes. So it's always that extra zone 2 stuff is always an off feet load for us. So we do a lot of conditioning on the field that's interval based, like high intensity interval based, where this O2 stuff is at the end of a day, where you can train that cardio system under fatigue. It's okay to have 2 sessions in and actually focus on that cardio system. We'll do sustained O2, and we'll do nasal breathing as well. We'll do intermittent nasal breathing and long sustained nasal breathing to help with that CO2 tolerance. So it basically just helps you body utilize oxygen better. So how can your body function with less oxygen in your system as well? So it helps you create a more efficient energy system, if you will, more efficient aerobic energy system. And on all our off days, we have a minimum 30 minutes of zone 2 in that day. So if every off day they have to do that and this is currently in the preseason phase. They maintain all these, and we're trying to push that system up. In season, it's a bit different story, but right now we're pushing that foundation phase right now with all our athletes in terms of strength and aerobic capacity. Regardless of their age right now, we're just trying to shift everyone up to a place. So when the season starts, we're in a really good place. Our bodies are reconditioned. We're resilient so we can attack the year and stay healthy and robust throughout the season.
Nice.
So I got this CO2 tolerance from the head SNC in Vegas, Doug Davidson. He's a genius in terms of exercise physiology. So I'll recommend him for your podcast.
Yes,
but he's where I got all this zone 2 stuff and all the ideas from on training that system to tolerate an 82 game hockey season or to shift that base up high enough so you're recovering really quickly between your sets and reps and rounds in boxing or MMA, right? So having that base will allow you to recover quicker between rounds as well.
Awesome. So then how does that...
It's boring, but athletes just suck it up. You're a professional athlete, brother.
No, for sure. And then how does that change as you get closer to a season? Obviously, we talked about, okay, you might be off the bike and stuff, and you might be doing more stuff on the field. But obviously you're not going to be doing maybe the same volume of that zone 2 stuff. So what are you doing then to improve capacity as you get closer to the season and then likely throughout the season?
Yeah, so when we get close to the season, a lot of our conditioning falls into small-sided games. That's where you're playing games on a field for our listeners, or games on a court, to train the energy system, to train the work-to-rest ratios, to train the ball and plays for the game specific. So are we meeting the demands of rugby, the demands of a game, a half, a set in rugby? So that's kind of how we shift from that control to chaos in terms of prepping them for the season. All that zone 2 stuff will be done at the end of a day still. We'll still do 3 times a week, zone 2, say at 4 p.m., everyone will be on a bike, slow, steady, heart rate monitor up, and just tracking that. If they can't maintain their heart rate in a certain zone, you either decrease or increase the cadence from there with that athlete.
I hope you're enjoying the chat so far. Before we get back to that, I just want to let you know that Sweet Science of Fighting is more than just a podcast. We have a full training app with strength conditioning programs for strikers, grapplers, and MMA athletes, so you don't have to think about what you're doing, and you're getting access to the latest scientific methods to improve combat sports performance. We have programs specifically for judo, for jiu-jitsu, for wrestling, MMA, boxing, Muay Thai is coming soon. All these things are going to be in the training app. We also have a private community where some of the coaches that have been on the podcast are in there to help you with any training questions and any performance questions you have. For example, Andrew Usher and Casper DeWitt. We also have some online courses within the training app. They cover strength, conditioning, mental skills, and weight cutting. And finally, we now have Ryan Villalobos in the community, a second degree jiu-jitsu black belt, who is there to break down any of your grappling matches that you want seen to by a second eye. He's currently breaking down videos on a separate Sweet Science of Fighting YouTube channel, and he will break down your video within the community. So if you have a match or a roll that you just recorded, you can upload that in there and Ryan will break that down for you. So what are you waiting for? Jump down in the description. You can check out the Sweet Science of Fighting Underground. Otherwise, enjoy the podcast. Gotcha. So how are you then manipulating the small-sided games for the app? Because I think a lot of people, they come into various, it doesn't matter what sport, it could be combat sports, 3-minute rounds, it could be 7-minute halves. Okay, that means everything we do in this phase is going to be 3-minute rounds or 7-minute halves. It doesn't matter. So how are you manipulating that time period when you're looking at small-sided games? Are you looking at, for example, intensity through GPS and trying to, I don't know, exceed game values through certain time periods or anything like that?
So yeah, big open-ended question in terms of small-sided games. Yeah, we can go anywhere with this, but let's look at how we do it to prepare for a game of sevens or a tournament. So there's a tournament on a weekend. You play 6 games in a weekend. There's approximately 50 minutes ball in play in that weekend of high density work where the ball is actually in play. So we structure, say, a training week off a percentage of that and training sessions off a percentage of that. So within a small set of game, we might have, let's say on a Monday, we might have 10 minutes ball and play where it's high density work for 10 minutes. And that is split in 2 5-minute halves where that ball and play is 5 minutes each. And then on a Wednesday, you might have 15 minutes ball and play. Might be split 3 blocks of 5 minutes. And from there, after we get our week, the whole week might be 70% of our tournament max in terms of ball and play. And that's high density work because in the game of sevens, there's no rest once that ball's in. So a lot of high density work. And how we manipulate, let's say, the volume, the density, intensity within that drill is field size, player number, and then work to rest ratio. So I might say the coach is, all right, there's 60 seconds ball and play, 30 seconds rest within this set. So they're letting the ball fly for 60 seconds. They're giving 30 seconds rest within that block. So within that set, that's the work to rest. And we start to bridge that gap. We call it best case scenario, but it's most teams' worst case scenario. So the longest phase of ball and play might be 3 minutes we've ever experienced. We want to take teams to that level so we can fatigue them and score tries. So we want to be able to function at the 2 to 3 minutes of ball and play. So we have to take our athletes there progressively and safely. So we'll start with the lower ball and play periods in, say, week 1. And by week 6, we're up to that 2-3 minutes ball and play for a single bout. So that's kind of when you think of a pure linear progression, that'd be the easiest way to explain it right now, is how we get them to that place from, say, 50% to 100% over the span of 6 weeks. Obviously, you could go in a lot more detail. I don't want to give all the secrets away in case the Argentinian Fijians are listening.
No, fair enough.
But that's how we progress and structure our high density work, is based off the tournaments ball and play, based off the work, based off the distance, the high speed running, the high intensity accelerations are the main metrics we work off of in terms of preparing athletes for the game of rugby.
Nice. And if anyone listening is like, okay, how does this relate to them as a combat athlete? I mean, you could do the same thing within, for example, boxing, MMA. A smaller cage or a bigger cage or ring will dictate how much action's going on. You can do the same. For example, 60 seconds work with 30 seconds rest within sparring, as an example of a work to rest. That can be a way to increase the intensity of some of your sparring sessions versus just 3 or 5 minute rounds. So these are just things that maybe as the audience could potentially think about in terms of their own training. I mean, you can even go as far as potentially analyzing some of your fights and looking at actually how much action is actually going on at certain times. That takes another level of dedication as well. But
Yeah, you could look at your work rate, your highest work rate, and say 20-second blocks. We'll do that in our rugby. So we'll look at the game, and we'll look at the highest intensity in 20-second blocks. It'll chunk into 20 and see where your highest work rates are. And hey, how do we replicate this? So how can we maintain this 20 seconds for 3 minutes to suffocate our opponents or suffocate the opposition? So I guess a good give me an example. Who'd be a good example who suffocates their opponents in MMA?
Khabib.
Yeah.
Khabib Nurmagomedov.
What's the other guy's name now that's coming up?
Makachev.
Yeah. So that's the idea of having a higher work rate to actually destroy your opponents that they can't handle or keep up with. And in the All Black Sevens, it's always been a high work rate, high work environment. So that's the point of difference for us against many other teams is their ability, their work ethic and work rate when other teams fatigue. So that more comes down to mindset than my actual training in a sense. It's their mindset versus the other team's mindset. Yeah, we're both fucked. We're both tired, but we're going to play hard. We're going to keep going. So it's what you do in the dark, right? Our coach always says how you find the light in the dark places. So our head coach, Tomasi Thama, is a big on that, on how the boys will find a way, we call it. Just find a way. And if you need help, your teammates are right there to support you. So just find a way.
Nice. And just for my own selfish learning. So we did the similar best case or worst case scenario with Romania rugby, and we'd do say 2-3 minute game blocks above a certain our peak meters per minute against one of the fastest games. But how did you keep that 3 minute block going? Did you just keep throwing a ball into play for the players to scramble to if say the ball was dropped or the ball went out of play? And then you just have to keep going?
The coach would be reffing, and he'd just keep it live. If the ball went out, he'd throw the ball to the other team.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Or he'd blow a whistle, make up a penalty, and turn it over, so the other team had to keep working. So the coach kept the game flowing because that's what we wanted. So they were constantly under pressure, and they couldn't rest. But yeah, you could kick the touch and rest, but it defeats the purpose of the drill, of the conditioning drill. So yeah, the coach would always keep the ball live, so the players would have to work the whole time.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I just had to.
And obviously,
see if it was similar.
We understand your output's going to drop over that 3 minutes. It's impossible not to, but it's how can we create a situation where the players have to adapt and perform under fatigue?
Yeah,
is the main thing for us.
Not perfect. And obviously, within sevens, you play pretty regularly, and obviously you play longer tournaments. Within the NHL, I mean, you're playing stupid regular games within the NHL. So
the main
you go.
The main difference, NHL versus sevens, is that sevens is a tournament format. You have 4 weeks to prepare for every tournament. So you have this nice, even, peaking formation in terms of your periodized plan. You can periodize really well for sevens because you might play one tournament a month. So you come up, you deload, you recover, you come up, you peak, you deload. So you can get a really good rhythm and flow. You can also get a good rhythm and flow in an 82-game season. You just have to focus a lot more on the microdosing side of things when you have an 82-game season, meaning you might be doing a 20, 30-minute lift after a game, after a practice at the end of a day. So you maintain the strength and power throughout the season. So you have these pockets where you're going to microdose 2 or 3 times a week. Your strength movements, when you have a long season and you have to play constantly. So that's the main difference. In sevens, we can fully deload for a week and then start to ramp up again and peak for a tournament. Fully deload, recover, peak for a tournament. So that's the main difference between the rugby format and an NHL or North American model of pro sport. A lot of games to combat with.
Nice. And let's start with that.
In combat sport, peaking for that event. You have a big camp to build your body up to peak for that event. So you have the time to build it up, which is a good thing.
Even some combat sports like grapplers, some grapplers will compete very, very often just because it can beat you up, but you're not taking head knocks and stuff. So some will compete almost every weekend, every couple of weeks, every month. So I think a lot of this is still applicable for a lot of fighters as well. I mean, there's even some MMA athletes that will compete very often or might compete MMA, then grappling, etc. So maybe let's start with the sevens format every 4 weeks as an example. How does your S&C change after a tournament and then throughout that period leading up to the next one?
Yeah, so post tournament, it's all about getting that body back to homeostasis, fully recovered and regenerate as quick as possible. So from right after the game's finished, what we do from recovery point of view in terms of get your protein in, get your ice bath done, get your meal in so you can recover. I'll talk even within a tournament. So we make sure you do things. It's not rocket science. You just got to nail your nutrition and nail your process in terms of recovery so you can go again, go again, go again. So it's the faster you do that, the quicker your body's going to recover. So might be protein, creatine, ice, rest, repeat as an example for our guys in terms of rugby context. Well, ice all tournament, and then after tournament, I'll let the inflammation come because you want that body eventually to inflame to fully recover, right? So we're just trying, with ice, we're just trying to stop the inflammation the whole weekend so it doesn't actually happen. And at the end of the tournament, we'll let the body inflame, let it go through the natural process of adapting to that contact and running and muscle damage. So there's a lot of research out there. I won't get into the science. You already know the science with me in terms of contrasts, ice bath. Should we ice bath? Should we not ice bath? There's still a huge debate on the pros and cons to it. So we still ice big training days, but we'll still let that inflammation come on when we have time to let the body recover, like that week after. So that week after, we'll come down, have a medical, check in with each athlete. We'll flush the next day we get home so we get the bodies moving. We flush out all the toxins and chemicals so we can actually get the body to a good place to be able to train the week after that. So if we do nothing that whole week, the boys come back slow and sluggish that second week. So we found if we come in early, just do the work, flush the body, maybe get a little low upper body hit in, and train on the Thursday or Friday that week, just a light skills session just to get our hands on the ball, get moving. And then by that Monday, we're fully recovered to go again, and we're not feeling sluggish. We're feeling refreshed and ready to go. So that's one of the big shifts we made last year in terms of preparation, making sure that we recover right that week after, and just sort of taking the whole week off. So we make sure we nail those from a recovery process. Then we start to rebuild. I won't give you the exact weeks, but then we'll start to rebuild from, say, 65% load, 75% load, 85% load, and then tournament. That's the idea of the model in terms of peaking. And then we'll drop right down to a 25% load and do the whole process over again. And obviously within a season, our goal is to help retain, maintain strength and power, and even to improve it if we can. So how can we shift these capabilities up as well in terms of strength? I hate using the word power. I'll use strength, force, and velocity, and how we can keep these components high. So we want the athletes to be able to produce a high amount of force throughout the whole season and to run fast all year. And how we do that is built into our training program. So we'll have acceleration work rate days, and we'll have high speed open field days. We're focusing on those different attributes for the athlete as we move through the year. And obviously we'll progress the sets and reps based on our periodized model in terms of increasing and decreasing those outputs throughout the year to get the best out of our athletes.
Nice.
But a big one for us is run fast often and maintain posterior strength. Real good mitigator of injury for us, because the hamstring is the biggest injured muscle in rugby. I'm not sure in MMA what is it. I don't know if it's groin, because hockey was groin. I'm not sure MMA what the key muscle.
Well, a lot of it's like more contact injury. But shoulders, knees, ankles, the usual stuff.
No, ours are more soft tissue from overexerting themselves, a sprint or multiple sprints.
Yeah. And then I guess, so you've got that model within sevens. Yeah. And then you've also got within hockey, you've got the every few days almost. So there's
every 3 days, let's say you're playing a game every 3 days.
That's so nuts, man. I can't believe they do that. But there are probably some combat athletes that compete every week. It's an intense thing to do, and they have to still manage themselves through that. So how are you? Obviously the game itself is the strength and conditioning stimulus a lot of the time in that
it's the conditioning stimulus in a sense. Yeah, it is the stimulus. It's not the strength stimulus, but it is a conditioning stimulus, right?
So then how do you maintain the rest of it?
Any sport, you look at the athlete's load on ice. If it was a super low load and it's not maintaining their capacity, they need something extra on top of that. Like when you used to work with rugby, you'd have guys that played low minutes. They'd need a top up after to make sure we're maintaining that level of conditioning. Yeah. From a strength point of view, you basically have 3 days. You'll have practice day, game day, off day. Repeat the process.
That's
So
crazy.
there's no such thing as an off day. So off day is basically that recovery day, that medical day where they come in and get their bodies right so they can practice the next day to get ready to play the third day. So those are
Jeez.
basically the 3 days in North America or in the NHL. So medical day, you won't lift. You might do a flush. Practice day, you might do a power session on the practice day, like a more explosive session. Then on game day, after the game, you'll do a strength microdose. And that's kind of the cycle throughout the season. So it might be a
Damn.
push, pull, lower body. You have those strength lifts to maintain or develop strength. And it'll be 30 minutes after a game to develop those priorities. So that's the model. That is the model, brother.
That's so nuts. It's same in NBA, obviously, because you got pretty much the same schedule within the NBA, the MLB, same schedule basically. It's unbelievable that's the way. I just don't understand. And even you get short preseasons as well, right?
Yeah, really short preseasons, like 3 weeks, 3 weeks, and then the off season is where you can make gains. It's just you have to take advantage of it. That's where you get your. That's where you build that foundation of capacity for the season, right? So,
but do you have contact with the athletes?
Pardon me?
Do you have contact with the athletes in that time? Because some players' associations don't allow that, right? Or they do?
In the NHL, some of the athletes have their own entity. They'll have their own SNCs, their own physios, their own chiropractors in the off season, and they'll go train at home with their guy for say 2 months or 6 weeks in the off season. So I'd say half the team probably had their own guys, and the other half would come in and train with us, the SNC and myself, and we prepare them for the season. We build up a foundation over that. So you have a really good block where you can improve that individual's weaknesses or needs, as well as build that strength and aerobic foundation for them to tolerate the demands of that season.
Nice.
So those would be the two different models I've worked with. Yeah, it's quite a different world. You just got to get your head wrapped around both of them if you want to work in those environments.
Yeah, sounds damn nuts. But I wanted to come back to. I know you mentioned you don't like the word power, but I'm going to use it just for the ease of the audience. But we could just say velocity under low and moderate loads. But
I'll explain. Yeah.
Now I was going to say, what are some ways you'd like to develop just lower and upper body or full body power within, I guess, combat, collision, whatever athletes there? Because obviously hockey, high power output demands, same with sevens and rugby. So are there any go-to things you'd like to use, do, protocols, etc.? Very general, but...
Yeah, definitely. So obviously plyos is the main one we use to develop power. Plyos and throwing shit, right? So throw implements and do plyos. And then in terms of that, you can change the tempo, change the rhythm of those movements to focus on different areas and increase the intensity. So what I mean by that, you can focus on where you're just trying to develop maximum jump height or maximum output at a peak. So maximum net impulse, if you will, where you're going through the range of motion, not necessarily explosively as possible, but your goal is to maximize height of the movement. So that would be more the optimal power, if you will, if you're thinking from that point of view. And some other instance, we want to develop rate of force. We're trying to decelerate really quickly and explode really quickly, where you need to react to something. So that's obviously in any team sport or any combat sport, physical sport, you need that reactive ability. So developing that is different than producing a maximum output, if you will. So ways we do that is to squeeze up that stretch shortening cycle in terms of drop, jumps, reactive, and try to minimize the ground contact time and maximize the height. We do that in all different directions. So initially we'll do it just vertically to train the musculature and tendons and reaction times and nervous system to be able to do that. And then we'll start to apply it in other planes where it's a lateral cut, it's a forward movement, it's a 505 stop start, or it's a Y agility, or it's reacting to a defender or a color to actually create that stimulus where you have to react quickly. So it still comes that continuum. We'll build different capacities on where they are throughout the year, moving from a more power-based performance to a more higher rate of force, higher intensity stretch shortening cycle movement. This will be more applied to rugby context if you're thinking in that environment. So how we manipulate those variables. So we'll move from loaded jumps or loaded explosive movements that are quite heavy, where it's the force dominant action. more explosive, even assisted movements where we're pulling that athlete to move them faster than they're actually used to, or more explosively than they're actually used to moving. So that would be the continuum you're trying to work off of. So example would be, here's the athlete weighs 225 pounds. He's jumping with 225 pounds on his back. That's the high end of the force. To that athlete's jumping with bands above him, making him 50% less than he actually weighs to make him more explosive in the vertical direction. And then, like I said, you can change the contractile components, eccentric, concentric components of how fast we want to do those sequences. Based on our progressions. Hope we understand. I know I'm talking pretty fast here. I'm a bit obsessed with biomechanics and that type of movement stuff.
Essentially, manipulate how quickly you dip down and then jump, so you can go slower down and up, or you can go very fast down and up, if we want to put it very, very simply. But obviously you mentioned there you start more on the force side of the quote unquote power spectrum and then move to the more velocity side. Does an individual force velocity profile ever play a part in that? Does that change at all depending on the athlete, or do all your guys come in, they all start force and move towards velocity as you get towards the season?
So they all start with a heavy strength movement based on where they are in terms of maximum strength output, but we'll complex either high force or high velocity depending on where that athlete is on the spectrum. So for example, they'll all do say 80% 1RM squat that day, or deadlift or split squat, and then their complex will be a jump with either 50 kgs, no load, or assisted, depending on what their output's going to be in terms of the complex. And then that'll transfer to, on our horizontal day, they'll all do a super heavy sled complex with some sort of jump. Could be halter jump where there are dumbbells in their hand, or it could be assisted where it's pulling them forward in terms of their output. So these are different ways we complex it. We also complex our with tackling as well. We'll do a heavy lift followed by tackles into pads, into bags, or scrum machines, depending on if we're looking for high force or high velocity in terms of that contact point of view. So we'll complex that as well. The closer we get to the season, we'll start to add in more of that rugby specific in the gym. So a lot of teams, don't be afraid to add your sport, bring your sport to the gym.
For sure.
For all S&C coaches, you can always complex the movement patterns you need in the ring or on the field with your strength movements. You can complex the skill components, the technical components as well. So we'll complex passing even with a rugby ball or med ball within the gym session to help get more touches and get that athlete better at that movement pattern within the gym environment. And it won't take away from the strength movement because it's that complex.
Yeah, actually, we did the same.
Sport-specific movement pattern.
Yeah, we did the same in rugby. We did a few experiments with a few different things, like upper body pressing with like fins. I had a scrum complex that was like an ISO scrum push into like a banded like scrum. I don't know what you'll call it, almost like a launch. Launch out into the pads and things like that. Launching medicine ball throws. I mean, for combat athletes, anyone listening, you can superset like your squats with medicine ball punch throws, rotational throws, kicks, roundhouse kicks against the heavy bag, double leg shots. All those kind of things can be used to complex with your strength movements or power movements, and you can potentially see transfer over because you get that potentiation effect from one. You can start doing some movements. You should feel a little more explosive doing it, and potentially carry that over to your actual technical training too. What Travis is saying. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about optimal power load. For the listeners, the combat athlete listening, that might sound like a little bit of gibberish, but essentially, it's the load that maximizes power output when you're performing a task. So for example, a jump, you might jump over various loads, and one certain load will maximize power output. Do you subscribe to the idea that you should train at optimal power load to maximize power development, or are you more over? You've pretty much already said you like to train over the spectrum, but just in general,
we strain on polar. We're almost more polarized training in the way we train. We train both extreme ends of the spectrum generally. So we'll train the high force and then the high velocity end of the spectrum in terms of what we want the athlete to be able to do in the game. So what you're explaining in terms of at a given load, you produce a force and a velocity, and that the combination of the product of those two makes the peak power. But usually that peak power occurs at a moderate velocity and a moderate load,
Yeah.
where we don't want the athletes to operate in the middle. We want them operating at extreme force and extreme velocity in terms
Mm.
of an output point of view. So this is the main reason we train the ends of the spectrum, both ends of the spectrum. Yes, there's a place for optimal power, but we look at producing more force or more velocity in our movements.
Hey guys, it's me again. I just want to let you know that I also have sweet science of fighting, rash guards and shorts, so you can represent sweet science of fighting on the mats and within competition. We have the classic, just like the shirt I'm wearing, rash guard, sweet science of fighting on the front, and we have the logos on the sleeves, and then McMaster on the back. We also have that in a shorts variation, same thing, with the sweet science of fighting writing on one leg, and we have the logo on the other. But my personal favorite, this is my personal favorite file. We have this in black and white, and it is the Taniwha Protector Guardian version of the sweet science of fighting with the logo on the back. This was designed by a Māori designer back in New Zealand, so a bit of my heritage on this jersey. It represents the acknowledgement of battle and war. It also represents strength and stability, and also has the New Zealand silver fin. But even if you're not a Kiwi, cop this. This is an awesome design. It is a custom made design. You will not find it anywhere else. So check that. That'll also be down in the description with a discount code. But back to the podcast. Awesome. Do Olympic lifts play any part in your training program?
Yes, sir. We all clean. We all power clean. We push press. We jerk. So if they can't clean or push press, or they can't clean because of shoulders, some rugby players have really messed up shoulders, so they either they'll do variations that will high pull or will counter movement jump with a load on their back, which can mimic the same movement capabilities of that. But yeah, we'll power clean within our cycle. We'll push press as a main movement in rugby. Got to be able to lift overhead relatively explosively. So yeah, we'll complex those in into our training. So those would be the main two we actually do in terms of the variations of the Olympic lifts. We don't snatch, but we'll overhead squat or overhead lunge. We used to snatch. We had too many shoulder issues, but now we do it under controlled condition. So if we're looking for triple extension, we're doing either jumps or cleans to get that high force and triple extension and that eccentric catch. We like to look at that component while being able to decelerate that load as you catch it. So you can do that off a jump, or you can do it off a clean where you have to absorb the load. I just like the rhythm of a clean. Once the athletes get the technique, it has a really nice rhythm in terms of triple extension, transfer, and catch under. There's a really good rhythm in terms of that concentric eccentric coupling, in my mind, to get the movement pattern. And I find the guys that get really good at clean, they all become our best tacklers. They can all produce the most force in that horizontal plane. We haven't run a correlation, but when you look at our best cleaners, they're usually our best tacklers.
There you go. For all the grapplers and wrestlers listening, get good at your power cleans, hand cleans, whatever it is, and you'll be shooting massive double legs in no time.
It's very important. That's like a lot of guys will just do the concentric component, but you're missing the vital aspect of being able to absorb. So when you think of two things you have to be able to do in sport, you have to be able to produce force and absorb force. Those are two main things you have to be able to do effectively to win over your opponent or opponents.
Nice. Obviously, you showed an Exafly flywheel thing in your little storage room there. Are you using that quite often with the players?
Yeah, we just started this off season. Actually, we just got them in. We used to use it quite a bit previously, but they disappeared. So I bought a whole new stack in the off season. But yeah, we use it regularly for a lot of single leg work. We actually do on it. We do a lot of single leg squatting where they have to get a rhythm and be able to control that eccentric load.
Yeah.
We also do it with rotation. It's quite good for that rotation and that counter. Right?
Oh, yeah, it's brutal, eh?
Yeah, trying to control that load on the way back. So that's basically like fighting your opponent, right? So how do you fight that opponent from pulling you back, right? Or flipping you over or tackling you. So I find it really good for that rotational movement and really good for like squat pattern type lifts as well. So that's what we've explored at the moment, just those two movements. I'm sure there's a lot more we can do with it, but those are the main movements we've done. Bilateral, unilateral squat patterns, and then that rotational movement's been really good for us.
Nice. Yeah, because the co-owner of Xfly, he lived like the suburb over from me in New Zealand. So he gave us his Exafly to use for the year until we were leaving to come to the States, and I had a good play around with a whole bunch of stuff on there. It's nice. You don't get that huge soreness that you would if you were doing huge eccentric loading, even though you're doing massive eccentric loading, which is really, really nice. And then rotational stuff, dude, that is like another level on the trunk when you're trying to resist that.
I find that rips our guys up though. Like you get
Dude,
sore. Like if we
it's
don't get sore
hard.
from the squat, but you get sore from resisting that rotation.
It's so hard.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
had a really good effect on our boys, that one. So start to use that more in this off season. I haven't brought it out for most of them yet because I want to save that for our next block. I just want to get that foundation where we're just moving through range of the motion with basically free weights just to get them moving correctly again. It's been a long off season for the lads. So we kind of gave them it because they won the World Series. They had their best year in years. They're very consistent. I think we won 4 or 5 tournaments in a row. So, like, boys, take the rest. We'll build up. We got 50 weeks to the Olympics, so let's just let the bodies heal here, and we'll come back better.
Nice. Yeah, that if anyone's interested in seeing, if you just search like rotation or flywheel, if you just search rotation, flywheel, something like that exercise, you'll probably find something. But if you have the opportunity to use one and do some rotation on it, it's another level. It's nothing like a cable or a band that you just can't replicate it without the flywheel. And it's awesome.
And remember, the faster you move that wheel, the faster it's pulling you back.
Yeah, that's the problem. And then you're just like sitting there trying to resist that thing on the way back, or you add the eccentric motor on top and give it the old 10% boost, and then you're going for a ride with it because that thing just pulls damn hard. I actually did the eccentric boost doing hip thrusts, so it was like 10% extra on hip. That was actually pretty legit because obviously with the hip thrust with the bar, as you sink lower, you don't keep that same tension, but when that thing's pulling on you. All the way down that eccentric load, that's really, really nice. So that's something I played around with there as well. That's interesting with the flywheel. Yeah, that's cool. And when you mentioned about the rotational stuff too, it was 6, 7 years ago when I was here in Austin, I was playing around with the 1080 Quantum, and I tried the same thing, the rotation. So they had like an isokinetic setting basically. So it was the same speed for anyone listening, and it was a tether. We wrapped it around a light, heavy bag, and I would grab it, and I would rotate it out, and then it would pull me back eccentrically at like I think it was like 40 kilos of force, and then I'd pull it, and then I would have to resist it all the way back with it pulling me. And I did the same thing with neck training. Had it on an iron neck. I would hold it there eccentric. Yeah, I was like, I've been doing a lot of jiu-jitsu. My neck will be fine. My neck was fine. I thought it was going to be fucked, but it wasn't. But just like 40 kilos of eccentric force, and it was just like pulling my head and then just stop it. Stuff like that, just playing around with it.
Our front rowers would love that shit. They love the neck straight.
Just neck all day on that thing. But yeah, it's crazy. Like some of the stuff you can do with, these things are not cheap for anyone listening. An Exafly will set you back 5 figures, and a 1080 will send you back more 5 figures.
Yeah, we don't have a 1080 yet, which wasn't in the budget. I had to pick one, so we got 3 flywheels here, so that'll do the trick.
Nice. No, I love that. I love that. No, I think we pretty much covered everything on this pod that I wanted to ask you, Travis. But where can people find you and follow you? Are you that active on socials anymore? Just a little bit on LinkedIn?
Yeah, becoming more active. So I've started to get these podcasts out there. So a bit of a work on for the season
nice.
is get out there a bit more, start to share my knowledge and ideas and experiences and kind of give back a bit. So this is probably my 3rd podcast this month, so we'll keep pushing that.
Oh, nice.
I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are the 2 main platforms I work off of. All my research is on ResearchGate. If anyone knows that platform, it's where basically all my sports science, biomechanics research sits is on that platform. So those are the 3 platforms I work off of: Instagram, LinkedIn, and ResearchGate.
Perfect. I'll link those up in the description too, Travis. But thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate the chat, man. It's good to catch up, and maybe I'll see you over there one day.
For sure.